I was quite impressed with our legislators and our executive branch with the willingness to allocate huge sums of money when the economy and the stock market needed support. Few questions were asked, and let's get it done, worry about repercussions later inertia superseded caution and sober reflection. We cannot allow something as crucial as the stock market or the economy to languish in the doldrums. There was a tangible willingness to fund at all costs, no questions asked. Then I remembered the discussions around health care for all and the phrase that catapulted from the hallowed halls of government. How are we going to fund health care for all? Taking care of the health and well-being of American citizens did not appear to be crucial during those debates. The willingness was absent, but the health and well-being of the stock market and the economy were an all-encompassing concern that dictated immediate action. The corporations needed our undivided support. Ordinary citizens' well-being was an irritating burden on funding, an anchor around the neck of sound fiscal policy, a socialist stain on democratic values. It is a bit incongruous that our citizens' health and well-being appear superfluous when economists repeatedly inform us that consumer spending energizes 70% of our GDP. If families' health is a constant concern, how are American citizens to purchase commodities from corporations? How are unhealthy citizens going to produce products for these exalted corporate entities? How many robots and how many imported workers will corporations utilize before American citizens determine that purchasing corporate products is not improving their health or well-being? Perhaps it is long past due for legislators and corporations to recognize that ordinary citizens are as crucial to the economy as are corporations and the stock market. Legislators need to realize that ordinary citizens are a linchpin of our economy and merit the same urgent legislation granted to the stock market and corporate America. Where does this kind of perspective, this manner of setting priorities, originate? This behavior, in my opinion, is part and parcel of our culture. We believe that Yankee ingenuity and high tech will overcome all obstacles. There is no problem that cannot be solved. This confidence is admirable, while at the same time it creates problems of its own. This reliance on ingenuity stifles long-term planning and preventive measures. These shortcomings give rise to putting out fires from crisis to crisis due to the lack of preventive policies. Confidence in putting out fires and a reasonable success record convince us that there is no urgent need to look for alternative methods. So, long-term planning and preventive options take a back seat to reacting to a crisis. Willingness seems rather feeble. This mentality of putting out fires is a rather short-term thinking process. The stock market also reflects this short-term thinking. Corporations focus on quarters while long-term planning for 5-year success or 10-year success gets lost somewhere along the way. If a CEO emphasizes a 5 or 10-year plan before corporate health becomes apparent, he may be looking for a new job after 3 years. Funding for health care for all similarly falls into this short-term perspective pitfall. Our legislators apparently look at health care funding as an expense, a drain on our economy, rather than as a long-term investment in the future welfare of the United States. The health of our citizens as a resource and not as an expense requires a long-term perspective. We need legislators who exhibit a willingness to revise their way of thinking. The same short-term mindset motivated our corporations to move their manufacturing overseas. Moving overseas ostensibly allowed corporations to make a profit and survive, but more likely permitted them to add another 5 cents to shareholders' dividend. Then, when overseas became too expensive and CEOs could no longer squeeze out that extra 5 cents, corporations announced they were restoring manufacturing to America. Pat us on the back. Look what a great neighbor we are, bringing all these jobs back to your communities. Overlook those last 30 years when foreigners were thriving on corporate America largesse, while American communities were left to fend for themselves while putting out economic fires domestically. While American manufacturing was moving overseas, foreign manufacturing corporations were constructing facilities in the U.S. and verifying that profits could be made in the United States. There was obviously a willingness to succeed and profit from manufacturing in the USA. Could it be that the 5 cent more dividend held precedence over a willingness of American corporations to succeed in manufacturing in the United States? Ask what the 5 cent dividend meant to American factory workers. Where was the long-term plan to make America thrive again? Wait, I know. Corporate America could take all those foreign profits and plow them back into American communities. The ever-elusive trickle-down economics that never manifested itself. A wonderful fantasy. Our short-term mindset may be coming back to haunt us in this current pandemic crisis. How will we ramp up our manufacturing to adapt to our current shortages when our manufacturing currently resides in China, Vietnam, Malaysia, etc. Whose bright planning created that scenario? Perhaps GM will help us make more fire extinguishers to aid us in putting out more fires. Or maybe our spacecraft makers could produce protective items for our healthcare workers. Let's ask China or Russia if they have a Marshall Plan for the American healthcare system. Perhaps our long-term planning of our national stockpile only extends to the willingness to produce more body bags and make another torrent of excuses.